Welcome to this edition of You Can Get There From Here. I'm Dr. Joel Moore, the chair of the Department of Communication and Digital Media Production at the University of Central Missouri. And it's my pleasure each week to bring you this show where I get to sit down and talk to some of our alumni from the department and find out what they are up to today and how the program helped them get there. Today, I'm visiting with Dusty Likins. Dusty earned his bachelor's degree in digital media production from the University of Central Missouri, and along the way, he did an internship with 610 Sports Radio out of Kansas City, and he's still with them today. Dusty, when I decided I was going to do this podcast, I knew you were one of the first guys I had to have on simply because of your resilience and how you battled and how you got where you are today. How you doing?
I'm okay. We're still here. We're still heavily grounded. It's been a journey that goes all the way back to the Warrensburg days, the how you can get into the program and how you can kind of show that you want to do something. And today without it, I'm not probably here, and I'm probably not as humbled as I am today from where I was. And I've been great. I've had a lot of good things happen. I'm sure you've noticed there's a pretty solid football team that started playing pretty well after I graduated.
Yeah, they're all right.
City.
They're all right.
Yeah, they got a pretty good team over there, and it's been a blast. It's like you said, it's been a grind. It's been something that is it's not like you wake up one day and it's, hey buddy, guess what? You've got this position. It's more so like you wake up one day and it's like, congratulations yesterday. Now do more, or show me more, or yeah, that was cool, but that was last week. Now we're on to this week, and you're just you just got to keep going day by day and have your head straight and know what your end all be all prize is, and hopefully you get there.
Well, tell us what you are up to today. What are you doing at 610 today?
Yeah, so I don't want to. How much time do you have? I'm kidding. No, we'll keep this within like one day's episode. But so started off there as a producer of many, many shows. In fact, my original boss, his name was John Hanson. He's no longer with us now. He's moved on and done other things. But my first show, if you want to know, I produced a church show for Prairie Village Sunday mornings from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. every Sunday morning. Fresh out of college. It's no secret to you. I was a guy that liked to have a little fun, and I think my boss knew that and knew that, now that I lived in, Kansas City, there were other places and venues that I like to see. And he's like, okay, well, if you really want to do this job, you got to start Sunday mornings at 8 o'clock. And it's not sports. It's a church show, which literally on a board or a production board was potting one channel up, hitting power, and sitting there for an hour and listening to the word. So however you want to put all that together is how I started my career. And then, that led to trust, which is a big thing in this industry is, Kansas City is a top 35 market. We're not LA, New York, Houston, what that kind of thing is. But we still have a pretty good audience, and people listen, and people like to listen to their sports. And when they can't, they find very many ways to get angry at you. And if you are the man that pushes all the buttons and you're not pushing the right buttons, you don't work for that company anymore. So, you got to gain trust, and you got to, it's not like, I know I'm sounding like an old man, but it's not like in college where if you don't do the right thing, you fail, and you come back Monday and you have a new course. It's you just don't come back Monday in this industry. And, so that led to, producing shows like Fesco in the morning that's on from 6 to 10 a.m. At the time was Lake and Bink. They were on from 10 to 2. You start to gain those people's trust. And then I started to produce shows for the Drive Time show from 2 to 6, which was with Danny Parkins at the time, who's now at the Score in Chicago. So you can see even guys in Kansas City can move up to just the ultimate mecca of media and radio. And so, you started to do that and started to gain trust. And then they kind of gave you the big time, which in Kansas City was the Royals. They fresh off a World Series. They were still winning baseball games at the time in 2016 and 17. And my boss had trusted me to do that. And so that all leads down a bridge of where you can get at the beginning stages. Can you produce a simplistic program as a church program that's an hour and a half long or an hour long? Okay. Can you come in and produce a show and gain trust of the co-host? That's a big thing in this industry. Once you build chemistry, you build trust. And once you can do that, it's like, okay, let's have a talk. And what do you want to do? And then that led to what we call air checks, which I'm sure you do those at UCM where,
Yep.
hey, give
Yep.
me a 5 minute topic or do, a stop set of something where I want you to talk about the Kentucky Derby for 5 minutes since you're passionate about horses. So then that led to that. And then that leads to the same sort of thing, Joe, put in like a reverse order. So they didn't just throw me in from 2 to 6 on drive time radio talk show host. They said, okay, if you want to do this, we'll give you a show Saturdays from 10 a.m. to noon. And I started a show on our sister station, 1660, from 10 to noon, just with me and another buddy. We'd go in there and chop shop for 2 hours. And then that leads to, hey, this host needs a day off or he's going to be out of town. Can you fill in? And you start to build trust, you start to build reps, and the more reps you can build, the more comfortable you can get. And Joe, you know me, I thought I could have came right out of college and done 4 hours of sports radio, and that microphone went live, and 5 minutes was the longest 5 minutes of my life. I went, we got 3.5 more hours of this. So that's kind of where we're at now. And we do our own show with our name attached to it. It's called After Hours with Dusty Likins. We do it every night. Monday through Friday, 6 to 9. Now, baseball season's a little different because the Royals play. So once the Royals kind of play, it kind of knocks it out. But a lot of opportunities throughout the week hosting for Fesco when he goes out of town here in the next couple of weeks. I'll be in there for 2 weeks. I'll host for the 10 to 2 guys. I've been doing a lot of drive time shows as of late because Carrington will go out of town quite a bit. And I like to call myself the sixth guy off the bench right now at 6'10". So I'm okay with that. It's
That's a vital
fun.
guy.
Somebody's got to do it. And then, like we said, hopefully that leads to the next step in the career.
So you call it the grind. I mean, we've talked a
Yeah.
lot of times in the past about the grind of getting there. I remember when you started out, you were working at, I think it was Red Robin part time
Yeah.
to help make ends meet and things.
Yeah.
What kept you going? What kept you in the field?
I'm twisted, man. I'm sick, Joe. I don't know what it is. You've known that since you've known me. There's a lot to it, man. I believe in myself. I know that I can do this. I know that this is what I've been born to do, is to somehow find entertainment in sports and just give it a weird twist. I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan, and I loved Arya Stark in that show, and she had a list of people that did her wrong. I have a list of people that told me that I couldn't do this, and it's still evidently in my backpack, clear, written down, whether it's an ex, whether it's a friend, whether it's somebody that I went to school with that said, you'll never do anything, whether it was my fifth grade teacher that said my mouth would get me nowhere in life. I'm dead serious when I say all these things. Like, that's part of it. I mean, part of it is addiction, part of it is passion, and the majority of it, and maybe this is an arrogant stance, but a majority of it is to all the people that said that you couldn't do it. And I come from a college that had a ton of talent in our broadcasting room. I mean, you had to fight to get on the desk, or you had to really prove yourself to get a spot in that room. And that kind of opened the door for me because I knew that if I could do it there and I got my foot in the door in the professional world and they haven't fired me yet, I'm either doing something right, they like something, or, eventually something will happen. But a lot of it is passion. A lot of it is enjoyment. Like, if I didn't enjoy this, I wouldn't do it. But and a lot of it is proving people wrong. I know that sounds petty and I know that sounds trite, but man, there's a lot of people in a lot of professional areas that are like, man, you'll never be a chancellor of your area. Okay, watch this. Or, you'll never make the big leagues, kid. And then all of a sudden his name's getting called up on the show. And a lot of that might just be fire and intensity inside that's gotten them to that point. So kind of a mixed and long an answer to your question, but that's kind of where we put it all in.
Well, I know my name is not on that list because with your voice, with
No,
your passion and interest in sports, and with your grit, I knew some point you were going to make it. Didn't know where, didn't know what it was going to be, whether it was going to be TV or radio, but I knew you were going to be there. I'm so proud of what you've accomplished. What have you learned about the profession and about yourself in this time?
The profession is brutal. It is exactly what you told me that it would be in the chair before I exited the campus at UCM. And like you said, it's going to start out. You're going to have to really want to do it because it's not going to be financially rewarding right out of the gate. And it wasn't. But you had mentioned earlier that I worked at Red Robin. I'm no longer, I haven't been there in a while.
Right.
I found a restaurant in Jack Stack who's been really supportive and let me have that as a side gig and let me work there in the mornings. It's also a powerhouse of food, so people are always there. So financially, that helps along with radio. That helps as well.
And you're a
Um,
foodie anyway, right?
yeah, I'm kind of one of those guys. At times I think I'm Bobby Flay, and then it comes out it's a bag of ramen with just an added green pepper to it, and I've done nothing but cheat. But no, so I mean, I think what you learn about the industry is, and we just brought this up about how we had all those talented kids in our class from Melissa to John to Ian to Reggie, all those guys. You find out right away that you might have been number one in your college class when it came to like what your professor liked. But when you get into the industry, everybody that's there, they were their professor's number one. So like you're in the big leagues. Like you're not, you got to earn your stripes. You have to learn that. Like you're not going to get a show right away. Like Danny Parkins, who's in Chicago, he didn't get the drive right when he walked in. He had to do nights. Then he did 10 to 2. Then they moved him to 2 to 6. And then you kind of got the career set there. But the industry is tough. It doesn't care if you are, Joe Schmo or, Joe KC. It doesn't matter who you are. You've got to do it the same way that everybody else does. You kind of learn that there's some things involved with the industry that maybe you didn't know before, like your affiliates of professional teams. So, like, when you say something that might not be liked by a professional team, you better believe your boss is going to get an email and they're going to say, "Hey, cool it on this. We're brothers in this fight. Like, I get it, we may not be playing well, but that doesn't mean that this person needs to go out and, maybe say things like that." You find out how quickly maybe affiliates are connected as opposed to, being at 1450 Coco and making fun of referees. And my boss Greg goes, "Hey, kill it with the refs." It's kind of the same thing. Like I got told by my boss at one point, like, "Hey, his name is Richard Lovelady. We don't call him something else." And it's like, okay, I understand that. So that's been interesting knowing, you're in a different world, I guess I could say. It's not scary. It's not, oh my gosh, but I've always said the microphone is more powerful than the hand grenade because what you say on that thing, there might be 15 people listening, but there's these things called podcasts and those things last forever. And, if they didn't catch it one night, they'll catch it the next. And I guess another thing that's crazy about this industry is that it's constantly changing. I mean, it's gone from mostly just on air to digital to, "Hey, you have an Instagram page?" "I do." "Okay, start making videos." "Okay, you have a Twitter page?" "Okay, start tweeting more often." "Hey, you have a Facebook?" Let people know because you never know who's listening. You never know who's going to find something and click on it. And the way TikTok is today, you could have a 10-second viral video make you a famous star
Yes.
overnight, which we've seen many times recently, as recently as last weekend. So that part about it is interesting. And then, just kind of understanding how everything works from teams to athletes to PR to communications. It's a real whirlwind, but it's interesting and fun if you're into it.
Well, and you talked about, you work at a sports radio station. You talked about pretty decent football team going on up there. Royals, you got to be around for the World Series. Give me some of
Yep.
the highlights of your career so far.
Um, so I think the first thing was probably I was standing behind Patrick Mahomes in his rookie year, or maybe it was his second year. I want to say it was his rookie year. Wasn't starting, and Adam Teicher of ESPN took a picture of the podium at St. Joe where they do training camp, and my gigantic, like ugly mug was right behind him. And that was kind of the first, I don't know, that was kind of like the first inclination that it was like, okay, so Dusty's around. Dusty's head is in a picture behind a quarterback. And then, your dad gets that and he kind of looks at that and goes, that's my boy. And I'm like, yeah, that's my ugly mug right behind the next, king of Kansas City. That was kind of the first time where I felt like I'd kind of arrived. I mean, I was still nobody at the time. I'm still not really a huge person here, but I had kind of like gotten, some text or some, things like, "Hey, that's you, right?" So that was pretty big. We kind of went a little quiet after that because we were just recording stuff and doing production work. Um, the Super Bowl was big because the first one, if you remember, um, I'm pretty sure they had a pretty wild track to the Super Bowl. They were behind to the Houston
Yep.
Texans. Then they came back, and in that time, I was producing what we had is the Chiefs postgame show with Jay Binkley and Kent Swanson. And I remember seeing the belief come through the phone lines because you and I both kind of come from the same background with Chiefs Kingdom. You know, a lot of heartbreak, a lot of
Yep.
John Elway ripping your heart out, a lot of stuff like that. And by the way, congratulations to your Vols on their College World Series last
Yeah.
night, and your UCM Mules on their college where you're living right now,
I'm doing
doing
all
what you
right.
do. But so those were fun. Where things kind of got a little bit more elevated, the NFL draft helped a lot. My show had just started then with After Hours, started to build an audience. And then we did the red carpet ring ceremony, where this is the first time in my life I'd ever gone viral for something good. We had asked Patrick Mahomes a question and Travis Kelce a question. They got meshed up together by like Yahoo Sports, Sports Illustrated, and I don't know if you've done this topic or this lesson in your class, but I had people reaching out to me for my royalties saying, do we have permission to use this video as long as we give you credit? And that was one big thing that we learned in this industry was like, pirating is still a thing and stealing people's content is still not good. So if there's a video that you like, you need to go ask those people like, hey, Joe Schmo, I love this video. Can I tweet it from our station, but we'll give you credit? And it's just that little bit of, and if they don't respond, you don't take the video. It's simple as that. If they respond, feel free. So, a lot of people are like, oh, you need to charge them money. You need to do this. I'm like, look, I just need to get my name out there and I just need to see where this goes. And then big highlight was TV. That was really interesting. That was almost like a Wally Pipp situation where a guy at 6'10 was going to be out of town, gave me the number to the producer. We got into contact, and then she liked what I brought, energy wise, entertainment wise, and we just started doing stuff on Fox 4 on there at 9 o'clock. And boy, it's interesting when you find out how many people watch the news at 9 a.m. and realize that they've known you and that they see you, and that was really fun. And next step we're just ready for. We're on the on deck circle, ready to take the next leap, which could happen, next week, tomorrow, a year from now. But either way, it's interesting.
Well, and you talked to just that was going to be my next question. You got into this to get into radio, but you've found your way onto television a little bit. What's that like? How's that making that transition?
Yeah, well, when you have this, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Humble is the way. No, man, it's interesting because I told people this the whole time, and this is a pat on your back if you want it, you and Darren. Man, I sat down in that newsroom for the first time, thinking, what am I gonna do? What's gonna happen? And where it all kind of like went away was here comes John Gearhart's out of the side, and I'm like, I know that guy. I was like, I know that guy. Like we used to do this. So I got a little comfortable knowing that. And as I'm getting wired up and mic'd up and John's talking to me, I'm like, is everything just like it was? And he goes, I guess I am, man. Just like it was when we were out in the basement at UCM. And it's almost like the only thing that's different was the studio. And even that wasn't that big of a difference because it's the same sort of lighting. It's the same sort of setup with your technical director, your producer, your floor director, your camera operators, everybody like that, and the prompters the same way. And it literally, Joe, I'm not kidding. I know that we're here face to face. It was just like doing, the news show at UCM because as soon as those lights hit on and everything like that, I didn't realize I was doing TV in Kansas City. The only reason I knew people knew that I was doing this because my pocket kept vibrating. And the other thing, it was literally, it was a teleprompter. It was your name. You were told what to read, and the anchors next to me, they had the script, and they'd say, "Hey, after this commercial break, this is your line." And then that thing would hit, and it was just like I was back home. And I didn't really have a shock value, and maybe it's different for other people, but that's literally what it felt like. Like I was just sitting there in that studio at UCM back in 2014 doing, UCM news media.
Well, that makes me happy to hear that you're taking what we've talked about in the classroom that, our equipment and what we're using here, you're able to take that in the professional realm. And that's exciting to hear about that. So you were one of the first students that we had when we started the sports broadcasting curriculum. You had a show that was on CTV, Central Television. You did the podcast Campus Chatter with us that won some awards. You got to be on air being a sportscaster. What are some of your fondest memories from that time?
Oh man. I think the one that I carry with me, which is kind of ironic, is not getting to meet the president for punishment reasons. I'll let you tell people that someday. But either way, I was in Darren Plummer and Joe Moore's doghouse. That's the one that sticks with me the most, because I'll never get to go back to that day and get to actually be in the same room as the president of the United States, whether it's Obama or Trump or Bush or whoever. It's the dang president, man, and I didn't get to be there. And I got to see all of my classmates that were all there dressed to the nines and in that special situation. That will always be the one memory that I will always take with me, because I had an opportunity to do something that probably not a lot of people in this world get to do. And I was told by my professors that you will not be joining us, you'll be staying home. So that always sticks with me. I think another one that's really evidently, obviously clear is when Ian Ross and I went to the top of the stadium to do the first ever live broadcast. And I remember he had his folder, and it was one of those windy days in Warrensburg early on in the football season. And his entire notes just went everywhere. I mean, all throughout McGuire Street, all over the stadium and everything. And he just goes, "Well, what do we do now?" I said, "I guess we trust each other." And we did our first broadcast. And I think that's after that broadcast. I think I know you did. You pulled me to the side and you kind of gave me that dad to son look, like, "Hey, man, like you could do something if you'll just grow up." And I always remember that, because there's times where, like, I'm still a firecracker at the studio, and I'll say something. My boss will kind of give me that look, like, "I don't know if you want to say that up here." And I'll go back to those days, or go back to those moments where, I think about those times, and doing that game on top of the stadium with the trust of my professors and my coaches to be like, "You know what, we believe that you can do this." That was great. You know, Doing play by play for the local high school team. People might be like, "How much fun is that to do high school football?" I was like, "Well, I mean, we gained an audience. I got, I never forget this. Still have the letter to this day. A kid that played on the team, I think his name was Colin Braun. And the first time I ever saw that kid play, I think he was like 5'10" and like 260 pounds. And I made a joke about what he weighed at his birth. And at the end of the season, his grandmother wrote me a handwritten letter and said, "This was one of the most entertaining and fun years to listen to Warrensburg High School football." And she baked me a loaf of banana bread. And I still have that letter, because that was one of those things where, like, yeah, you talk, you ramble, you don't know who's listening, but somebody might like it. And here's some lady in her mid 80s and seeing, grandkids and kids play all throughout Warrensburg High School football. Never once did she make anybody a loaf of bread or write them a letter, but for some reason she wrote me and Daniel a letter and enjoy what she likes. So those are a couple of the highlights that you asked in the beginning of this interview, like, why do you do this? It's because when you get those sort of things and that sort of stuff happens, you feel like you matter. And I know, being a professor or being a student, when you feel like you matter, you feel like you've done something right.
And being a parent with three kids who have been in shows, who've been in musicals, who've been in concerts, who have competed in sports. If I couldn't be there, I get a lot out of, like, if my son's playing in a tennis tournament, for example,
Yeah.
and I can't be at that tournament, parents texting me with updates with scores and things, because we don't broadcast tennis.
Right.
But if I'm on the West Coast and I can't be in Warrensburg and I can tune in and listen to the stream and hear about my kid, we hear stories like that all the time. That's one of the things we don't hear enough about, I don't think, is the service that you provide. A lot of people go into this business because they want to be on the air and they want to be able to hear their voice, and they be able to want to be able to watch their favorite teams and talk about it, but they don't think about the service they're providing and what it means to people. And I think we need to do a better job of letting people know that, Dusty Likins is giving you all this information. He's connecting you. You can't be in the locker room. Dusty Likins can, and he can connect you to that and really make a big impact for you. So that's one of the things I'm really excited about what you're able to bring to the table.
Yeah, it's fun. it's different. I mean, obviously you think, you go into a locker room, you think it's going to be, this cool thing, and you find out very shortly, like you're in their domain. They don't care if you're, Al Michaels or if you're Dusty Likins. If they don't want to talk, they don't want to talk. And if they don't want you in there, they're gonna be very evidently clear. And there are showers and there are lockers, and you can imagine it's their world, and they don't have a care in the world. But it is, like you said, it's very interesting. I'm watching a documentary right now on World War II, and one of the guys that was there is a journalist. And at the time in 1941, radio was like the new medium that people loved. Obviously, you remember the FDR and the
Oh yeah.
fireside chat sort of thing, but he gave updates of what was happening on or what was going on during World War II during 1941. And the people in the narrators in the video, which were his grandkids now, are saying, people would put radios on their dinner table, or they would listen because no one else was there. No one else was watching the battle lines, or, knowing which front was, striking which front. And that's how they got their entertainment. Now, obviously today you have so many more things. I mean, this is number one right here. I mean,
Yeah.
how many times we find ourselves 10 o'clock at night saying, put it away and go to bed. But the phone still carries the radio and the radio still carries the phone. So, I mean, without podcasts, people use their Bluetooth. Well, they get their Bluetooth from their download page from their phone. And, you never can take what you're doing for granted, whether you're doing it for a Warrensburg high school team or whether you're covering a NFL team. There's people that want to know, and there's people that want to know the details. And
Yep.
it's the details that can sell, because anybody can say, oh, today's game was fun. The Royals win 4-1. But, you could go in there and say, well, in the middle of the fourth, I heard their manager say to the team, like, hey, let's get our heads out of our butts and let's start playing some baseball and let's play a little bit better defense. And like, when you hear that, you're like, okay, that guy seems to kind of be a little bit more connected. You're going to focus more towards that than the evergreen news that you might get elsewhere.
Yeah. So what is next for Dusty Likins?
Oh man, that's a loaded question. Um, I want to do sports radio in Kansas City for as long as they'll let me. We just had a guy announce his retirement from the morning show. So Josh Klinger had announced his retirement. So we're kind of proving ourselves a little bit more and more every day. We filled out a resume for the first time in a really long time. And you wait for that phone to call, man. And like I said, I'm the sixth man on the bench at 610 Sports Radio. This is kind of the slower time in sports, which is to me, which is interesting, because this is kind of where I really love this, because I can do, my top five favorite, summer destinations. I can do, the top three things to eat at a baseball game, because it's the Royals. And we're not quite yet to training camp. And I don't know how interesting training camp is to most people, but they don't wear pads. It's hotter than, Hades out there, and they're not really playing any competitive games. The Royals are in the dog days of summer. So this is where you can really be creative. This is a fun time for sports radio, at least in my mind, because, you've got so many different things going on. Last night I said that the TV might have been hotter than the weather, because you had a game 7 of the Stanley Cup. You had a game 3 of the College World Series. The Royals were playing. So whether you're a fan of them or not, you had 3 different things to watch. And at one point, they all kind of finished right next to each other. Like the College World Series ends, Tennessee wins. Then the Royals win. They have a great game from their starter in Cole Reagans. And then the Stanley Cup ends with an intense final 3 minutes of just hockey. And I mean, I'll be honest with you right now, I don't watch a lot of hockey, but if it's a game 7 for the Stanley Cup, my focus was right there, because it's something crazy. And so, just that in the middle of June, you had that last night. And, what's next in general for me is just, like I said, keep answering the phone and keep, creating content and try to continue to be myself, which I think is the most important thing. I think in this industry, a lot of people try to get away from who they are. They try to sound different. They try to be a persona that they're not. And, just continue to grow in this industry and grow in this business. And prove that I can do it. That's what's there until they won't.
I think you're made for 610, because is the mantra still, we don't just talk sports, we talk about what sports fans talk about. And the
Yeah.
Dusty Likins I know is kind of a renaissance man. I mean, you're into food, and you're into movies, and you're into a lot of other things besides just sports.
Yeah.
and you can bring that to the table. So I think you're made for 610. Last couple of questions I'm going to ask you. First of all, what advice would you give to a current UCM student who's getting close to graduation? And second, what would you tell a student who's thinking about coming to UCM to further their education?
Wow. I'll answer the second one first. And I think this is where, excuse me, I think this is where my mindset went. UCM is, to me, a school that is one of three different things that I looked for when I was going to decide what I want to do for college. Did it have a program that I could get into that I liked? Yes, it did. It didn't have the digital media program yet, but it had everything around that. It had broadcast media, I think is what I saw. And I said, okay,
Yep.
I can do
Yep.
that. It was far enough away from home, but also close enough to home to where like I knew that if something, and this was just for me because I grew up in Blue Springs and a suburb inside of Kansas or outside of Kansas City. So I was 45 minutes away. Well, that was long enough for me to feel away from home, but I was close enough to know that if anything dramatic or chaotic would have happened, I was easily able to get home. And then third most, I kind of just knew I had some connections and friends that all went there. So I knew I was going to have at least one to two people that I could lean on, which I think is big for college. I think a lot of people, they want to go to Mizzou because it's Mizzou. And then they go to Mizzou and they realize none of my friends are here. And I don't want to make friends. And I don't want to join a fraternity. I don't want to join a sorority. I don't like this. And they end up transferring to UCM and they end up still getting a degree and having a good degree and having fun in college. So I would say if you're thinking about going to a school, I mean UCM has it all. Plus, like that town has blown up since I was there, man. You guys have a Chipotle now. You got a Buffalo Wild Wings. That stadium has been built to a mansion. There's new renovations going all over the place. You've got the Mule National that I wish existed, being a big golfer. So I mean, it's I would say that also it's not the UCM that maybe your parents went to or the rep that it used to get. It's keeping up with the Joneses these days. And then the other one was about getting into the industry. Is that what you
To
were
a current,
saying?
yeah, to a current advice for a current student. Yeah.
Yeah, advice for current students. Believe in yourself, I think is the big one. Make sure you really want to do it. Because I know I went to school with some guys that thought they wanted to do it and thought they could do the grind, but maybe they thought they were a little bit better than maybe they really were. Maybe they didn't have a good professional sort of side of them to where they just kind of walked in, thought they were the show, and it was like, hey man, guess what? You're not there yet. And they just didn't want to wait for their time. And I think that if you're able to really put one foot in front of the other, humble yourself a lot. I mean, you got to do that a lot. I mean, there were times I went home, Joe, not in tears, but darn near in tears because I was like, I'm never gonna get my chance. I'm never gonna get my chance. And now, sometimes I'm complaining that, oh man, I got a show tonight on a Friday. Dang it. It's like 5 years ago, I'd have been like, oh my gosh, okay, let's overdo this, let's overthink it, whatever it may be. But advice to current students I can give that I would say that I'd hit the most would be that to trust yourself and to really want this and to really do this. And then to also understand, like you told me, like you're not going to make $55,000, $60,000 straight out of college. It's not going to happen if you're doing this profession, right? Get you a nice, comfortable side gig that's flexible with the other job. And I've had that. I thank people at Jackstack throughout the entire world that they've been able to accommodate me for this because there are times in every industry where it's, hey man, so and so is going to be out. Can you fill in? And I'm like already scheduled at another job, and I've been able to, contact them and say, hey, I've got to do this, but I can make it up somewhere else. And handshakes hand, and it's allowed me to do that. It's allowed me to stay financially on top of things and be able to pay bills and live in a house in downtown Lee Summit and enjoy my life. So the advice is believe in yourself and know that you really want to do it, and also understand that you're gonna have to grind. That's the thing. You're gonna have to grind whether you like it or not.
That's going to be on your tombstone someday. He was
I hope
willing to
so.
take the grind. So,
Or it's going to
Dusty,
say he finally grinded out.
I like that too.
Yeah.
Dusty, so glad to have you on today. I'm so proud of you. You've done some great things and knew you'd get there, bud. I knew you would make it, and then you have.
Well, I appreciate that. I wouldn't be there without you or Darren Plummer or Newsome or all those wonderful people in the UCM Digital Media Productions. And I guess another piece of advice to give you a bonus question is listen to your professors.
That's a
Listen
good
to
one.
them. They
That's a good
might
one.
sound like fathers, they might sound like dads or grandfathers, and you might roll your eyes at them, but they know, they believe, and they've been there. If they haven't, then they don't have the credibility to do what they're doing. So listen to your professors and trust in your professors because they know what's best for you.
Well, that's a great note to end on. I want to thank you again, Dusty, and thanks to all of our listeners today. Remember, you can tune in, check us out on YouTube at our YouTube channel for UCM Media Network. That's youtube.com/UCMMN, or check out our podcast on Spotify. Thanks again for joining us. This is Joe Moore reminding you, you can get there from here.